if we're talking about Hashem intervening in the world or doing things to us that show us his hand, that where his voice speaks and we hear it, which is not, every moment of every day, and suddenly it rings crystal clear. We're talking about a view of how the world is and how it works that is obviously very uncomfortable in the present era, because in such a scientifically influenced era where people think about the world as it works according to the way nature goes, everyone is in a sense taught to understand the workings of nature as being indifferent, that there's a smattering of pure randomness here, and there's a smattering of implacable, unseeing, blind automaton law-likeness over here, and it all mixes together, and it produces some result that's very interesting, and that we have to kind of survive and get along in and navigate, but it doesn't necessarily have a message for you. It doesn't care about you. Those are the kind of popular ways of talking about what the world is. If you kind of look at popular science or public intellectuals of the high-tech scientific West or what have you, right? And so, when you take those kinds of perspectives, and then you say, no, I'm gonna push back and say, I think Hakadosh Baruch Hu's will is expressed in everything that happens in the world, then that is something that people often try to knock down by then turning towards the Torah and going after it by saying, oh, well, so then what you're saying is you think that everything in here is literally true. But look, we have this evidence that this isn't or that isn't. And so, pick one, either science works or the Bible works, and you have to pick one. And what's funny is that people set up this false dichotomy where they say, you have two choices. You can either say that the way you read the Torah is somehow, it has to be this very naive and what people sometimes call literalistic, although I don't like the word literal, because I think the Torah is very much against the notion very against the notion of a clear difference between the literal and the figurative. But even so, let's say people imagine, well, if you believe that what it's saying here is true, and that there is a God who created the whole world and he's king, and all of this is an expression of his will, then you must have to also accept a reading of it that's somehow very childish and simplistic, and also literalistic in certain ways, that someone else can amass a lot of evidence that they can say argues, that must be false. Or you have this other choice, which is to say, oh, it's all kind of figurative, including the fact that it says that Hashem is there and he's in charge of everything. And that's not really true. It's just a sort of set of stories that people tell in order to kind of comfort themselves, or in order to produce good behavior from people or whatever. Those are the two options that people are usually being asked to choose between. But it's funny, once you think about it, it's obvious that there's a third option here, which is that it can both be the case that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is 100% as real and as powerful and as unlimited in how to express his will in his creation as you can imagine, and more so. But it can also be the case that he chose to give us a book that, had its deepest secrets and the deepest understanding to be had of it involves sophisticated reading of it, and not like a childish sort of what some people sometimes call literalistic reading, but one that embraces the possibility of multiple meanings, that embraces the possibility of, well, this number here is really, carrying a message for you that's about the numerical properties of a number, and not just about what Herodotus would say, or what an academic historian or archaeologist would say, et cetera, et cetera. Like, if Hashem is really in control of the whole world, he didn't just write the Torah. He wrote War and Peace also, right? He wrote everything that exists. He is responsible for and in control of everything that happened and exists. And it's really just a question of where he wants to put the message. He can put the message in Ma'aseh Bereshit, when the earth opens under someone under certain circumstances, and he can put the message in a particular document. And it doesn't matter, in a sense, how the letters got in there, first of all. Like, whatever historical or archaeological process you want to imagine for that, he's also in control of that, right? And the result of it is whatever he wants that to be. And it can also be the case that the text itself, as you were saying, like going back to your original point, it is both the medium for his message, and it's also something he created. And so it can be thought of as like everything else being authored by his hand. But the point is more that he told us that he has things he put there for us to study, and he wants us to find them out there. But the way we find them out, no one ever told us, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't tell us, the way you find out my message is you have to read this thing like an incurious 5-year-old, or like a pagan who just got off the train from ancient Greece or ancient Egypt 10 minutes ago, or any other number of ways that you could read the text where it seems to you to be saying something that's sort of like hard to make sense of. So I think that's the sort of third way that has to be argued for here, and that we need to remember, is that the statement that the Torah gives us, that Hashem is fully in charge, let's take that as the premise. And then if that's the case, he wrote the Torah, it's not difficult for him to do, and it doesn't even matter how he did it, and through what means in this world that came about, because he's the author of the Torah, he's the author of every other piece of creation, but it's where did he want to put his true message, and how do we discern that, and what's our methodology for extracting that message and carrying it into the world, so that we can see how what we find in the Torah coheres with what we see in the events of the reality we perceive.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.